My name is Elena Marino. I am 31 years old, and I am the new waitress at Il Sistante, which means I am supposed to be invisible. Tonight, that is a problem. The current time is 9:37 in the evening in Manhattan. I am standing in the amber-lit alcove of the restaurant's most private corner table. The man sitting at that table is Caleb Hart. He's 41, the chief executive officer of a cybersecurity firm called Hart Sentinel, and he is famous enough that even I know his face. He's here to sign a deal. I know the number because the walls in this old building are thin $120 million. The other party is Rinaldi Capital. And that is the other problem. The air in the alcove is warm and smells of beeswax and old leather. A low, smoky jazz trumpet weaves between the faint clinking of silverware from the main dining room, the crystal glass by his elbow, filled with water I poured myself 10 minutes ago, hums almost silently, vibrating with the music. My hand, however, is not steady. I feel the heavy silver tray in my left palm begin to tremble, threatening to rattle the fresh highball glass I am meant to be delivering. My heart is not in my chest. It has relocated, pounding a frantic, sick rhythm high in my throat, right below my jaw. I set the tray down on the service stand. The sound is too loud, a metallic thud that cuts through the jazz. Caleb Hart does not look up. He's a man of focus. He's leaning over a thick stack of documents bound in dark blue leather. His pen, a simple black instrument that I am sure cost more than my month's rent, hovers over the signature line. Across from him, two men from Rinaldi Capital are smiling. Their suits are too shiny, their teeth too white. They look like expensive, well-dressed wolves enjoying the scent of the kill. My training screams at me. Do not interrupt the guest. Never interrupt the signature. Serve from the left, clear from the right. Blend into the wallpaper. I take a step forward, brushing my sweaty palm on the stiff black apron. "Sir," I say. My voice cracks. I clear my throat and try again. Louder this time. Aiming for authority I do not possess. "Sir, you have to leave." I add a word, pushing it out with all the force in my lungs. "Now." Caleb Hart finally looks up. His eyes are not cold, as I first thought. They are something else, calculating, the color of gray steel. He's not angry. He is assessing. He looks at me. Really looks at me, taking in the cheap bun my hair is pulled into, the faint sheen of sweat on my forehead, the starched white shirt that is one size too big. He sees a new waitress, barely 31, who has just committed the cardinal sin of fine dining. "Who are you?" he asks. His voice is deep and even, not a shout, but a demand for data. I swallow the fear. I try for the wit that usually saves me. "I am the person saving your life tonight," I reply. My voice is steadier now. "That is, if you are willing to trust a waitress in secondhand shoes." He does not smile. His gaze drops for a fraction of a second to my feet, hidden by the long linen tablecloth, then returns to my face. He's weighing the probability. Why am I doing this? Why am I throwing away the one job, the one life that has felt safe? Because 15 minutes ago, on my way back from the staff locker room, I passed the men's room corridor. Sylvia, Vincenzo Rinaldi's executive assistant, was there. She was speaking into her phone, her voice a low, venomous hiss. She thought the hallway was empty. She did not account for a waitress walking in shoes with worn-down soles. "Make sure the feed is looped," she whispered. The switch flips at 9:45 exactly. When the camera is blind, Luca escorts the guest to the South Alley dock. The car will be waiting. No, he will sign. Vincenzo is very persuasive. A camera blind, a side alley escort, a waiting car. In the world I was born into, this sequence has a name. It is a dance. It is the soft-shoed shuffle they do right before the floor drops out from under you. It is a performance I thought I had buried, locked away with my father's name and the past I ran from. Now, in the warm alcove, Caleb Hart is still watching me. I see the glint of metal on his left wrist, partially hidden by the cuff of his immaculate shirt. It is a smartwatch. As I watch, it vibrates, a frantic, silent buzz against his skin. He does not check it, but I see his jaw tighten. I caught a glimpse of that screen earlier when he set it on the table to sign a credit card slip for the preliminary bottle of wine. I have good eyes. It is part of the job. I saw the notification that flashed security ping Queen's data center. Blocked. Something is wrong with his calendar. Something is wrong with his security. And he knows it. The door to the alcove swings open. It is Carlo, the maitre d'. His face is pale, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and anger. He is clutching a large leather-bound menu as if it is a shield. "Miss Marino," he hisses, his voice a sibilant whisper of panic. "What are you doing? You are not to disturb the VIP." He glances nervously at the Rinaldi men, who are now staring at me with open annoyance. "I apologize. Carlo," I say, turning to him, but I do not move. This is the moment. The invisible wall of restaurant etiquette is in front of me. Solid as brick, I'm supposed to apologize, to scurry away, to be fired quietly at the end of the shift. Instead, I turn back to Caleb Hart. I reach out, not to his arm, but to the table. I pick up the heavy linen napkin from his bread plate. With a flick of my wrist, I snap it open and lay it gently over the documents, covering the signature page completely. It is a declaration of war. The Rinaldi men start to rise from their chairs. Carlo makes a small, strangled sound. I lean in close to Caleb, so close I can smell the faint, clean scent of his soap. I lower my voice to a whisper that only he can hear. "If you get up from this table right now," I breathe, "I will tell you everything." He does not move. He's a man of numbers, a man of logic. He's weighing the odds, processing the impossible variable I represent, a crazy waitress, a corporate psychopath, a setup. His gray eyes search mine, looking for the flaw in the code. I have one card to play. It is the dirtiest, most dangerous card I own. I did not even know it was still in my pocket. I let my eyes flick to the Rinaldi men, then back to his. I form the word with my lips, barely making a sound. Fico. It is not a word. It is a key. It is the name Vincenzo Rinaldi's family, his real family, uses. It is the name the street uses. It is a name that should never, ever be spoken in a place like this, by a person like me. Caleb Hart does not flinch, but his pupils constrict. It is a tiny, involuntary reflex, but I see it. The gray irises tighten around the black, like a camera shutter closing. He knows that name. And he knows no one outside the circle is supposed to. The tension in the alcove is so thick I can barely breathe. The jazz music seems to have faded, leaving only the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. Then, from the other side of the room, the gas fireplace makes a noise, a sharp pop click, as the flame adjusts. It sounds like a punctuation mark, a comma in a sentence that is shaking itself apart. I check the antique clock on the wall, 9:39 in the evening. 6 minutes. I lean in, my lips almost brushing his ear. "In 3 minutes," I whisper, "everything changes color." I step back, my hands clasped behind my back in the classic at-ease pose of a servant. But I am not at ease. I am terrified. I do not tell him that I, Elena Marino, am a lie. I do not tell him that I was born Elena Russo. I do not tell him that I swore an oath, a sacred vow to my mother, that I would never ever get involved with the family again. But tonight, in this golden firelit room, that old oath feels like a paper napkin, and it is about to catch fire. I used to be Elena Russo. It is a name that sounds like breaking glass. It is a name that makes police officers pause and check their records twice. It is a name that makes landlords in safe neighborhoods suddenly remember an apartment has just been rented. My father was Marco Russo, and he was an accountant. This is the simple part. He was, specifically, a money laundering accountant for a certain family based in Brooklyn. This is the complicated part. And one day, when I was 16, he disappeared. This is the part that never ends. My mother, Carmela did what she had to do. She burned his old ledgers in a rusty oil drum behind our building. She cut up my father's expensive suits for rags, and she took me to the Social Security office with a story about escaping an abusive husband, which was not entirely a lie. She filed the paperwork, and we walked out as Marino. We ran from the shadows of Brooklyn and found a different, brighter kind of darkness in Manhattan. Now, I live in a studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen. It is small enough that I can touch my stove and my shower at the same time if I stretch. I work 2 jobs to afford this luxury. My mornings start at 4 a.m., serving burnt coffee and dry pastries from my Aunt Rosa's food truck near the Lincoln Tunnel. My evenings are spent here, at Il Sestante, as an apprentice waitress. 2 jobs, 2 Elenas. The one who smells like espresso beans, and the one who smells like expensive truffle oil. I keep my real name, the Russo name, tucked away like a sharp blade in the bottom of a clean sock. You forget it is there until the day you step on it. I only got this job a month ago. My old roommate, Nina, who works in hospitality, gave me a list she called easygoing employers. Il Sestante was at the very top, the owner. Signor De Luca was described in her notes as being allergic to journalists, but pays on time. That sounded perfect. I am not a journalist, and I desperately need to be paid on time. For 3 weeks, I have been in training. I have learned the essential arts of fine dining. You always serve from the guest's left side. If he is right-handed, you learn to read a table in 3 seconds. You can tell by the way a man looks at the wine list if he is going to order the expensive Pinot Noir, or if he is lying to his dinner guest. You become a ghost, a pair of hands, a polite smile. Rich people, I have learned, rarely look a waitress in the eyes. They look past you, through you, at the wall behind you. It is a useful skill they have, making you feel unimportant. It helps them justify the small tip. But tonight, one of them did look at me. His name, I knew, was Caleb Hart. He was the man in the alcove. His face was on the cover of a magazine I had wiped coffee grounds off of just this morning at the truck. The headline called him the man who ethically patches zero-day vulnerabilities. The article inside called him democracy's bodyguard, a digital knight. I had a different name for him, a silent one I had invented when I first saw him sit down. The man in the suit who knows how to listen. I had watched him listen to the Rinaldi men. His head tilted, his eyes focused. He was not just hearing, he was processing. He was different. Rinaldi Capital, Usoy, on the other hand, was not different at all. I knew the name on the surface. They are a private equity fund. Their polished website talks about corporate restructuring and optimizing assets. In reality, they are Vincenzo Rinaldi. And Vincenzo Rinaldi is my cousin. He is the Vico I whispered to Caleb Hart. He is the one who, at my baptism, gave me a beautiful porcelain doll with a tiny, almost invisible crack running down its neck. My mother was horrified, but Vico, who was just a teenager then, had smiled at her. He said he liked things that were beautiful but breakable. He grew up to be a man who improves companies. He buys them, he breaks them, and he sells the pieces. He uses threats and intimidation, not spreadsheets. He is the polished corporate, sanitized face of the same sickness my father served. I never intended to visit the past. I have a new life, a boring, safe, exhausting life. I pay my taxes, I go to the dentist, I am normal. Until last night. I was walking home from my shift. Just after midnight, I saw Luca. I recognized him instantly, even in a suit that cost more than my car. Luca is Vico's right hand, his shadow. He was at the small, cheap bar across the street from Il Sestante, the bar where the service staff goes for a shift drink. I slipped into the booth behind him. I ordered a club soda I did not want, and I listened. Luca was not being subtle. He was talking to one of our busboys. He was asking about the kitchen layout. He wanted to know about the fire exits. He asked which cameras covered the service hallway. My blood went cold. I went home, but I did not sleep. At 3 a.m., I called my mother, Carmela. She still lives in Queens, in a small apartment above a bakery, surrounded by saints and regret. Her voice was thick with sleep when she answered. Elena, what is wrong? I asked her one question. Mom, Vico is in Manhattan. He's doing business. There was a long, terrible silence on the line. Then I heard her sigh, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Elena, she said, her voice sharp with a fear I had not heard in years. If you see the name Vico, you do not stand in the middle of the road. You let the car pass. I looked out my window at the empty, rain-slicked street. I'm not in the middle of the road, Ma, I said, my voice quiet. I'm pulling someone else out. I hung up. Here in New York, the world is a maze of legal contracts, stock market trades, and blood oaths. They all look different, but they all serve the same masters. I am just a waitress. I am supposed to be invisible, but I know the music. I grew up hearing the tune. I know the dance. And I know that when the lights dim, it is because the knives are about to come out. The day had started with a betrayal. It was 6:10 in the evening, just before the dinner rush. The restaurant was quiet, filled with the smell of lemon oil and the sound of my own footsteps. I was in the main service corridor, the one that runs from the kitchen to the private dining rooms, when I heard her. Sylvia, Vico Rinaldi's executive assistant. She was standing in the alcove by the wine cellar, speaking low into her phone, her voice like poison. He's running late, but he will be there, she said. She was checking her manicure. The plan is simple. Spill the wine on him. It is an accident. Luca will be there to help him clean up. He escorts him out the south alley to the car. The car will be waiting. It is clean. I stopped breathing. I was hidden by a stack of clean linen. In the world I came from, this had a name. My father used to talk about it in whispers. Pasqua, the Easter play. It was the friendly, polite ritual of breaking a wing. You create a small, manageable crisis. You offer a polite, helpful solution. You guide the target away from the crowd, out a side door. It is the last walk anyone ever sees them take. My blood turned to ice. I needed to know more. I went back to the kitchen, my shoes silent on the tile. Above the pass, where the chefs line up the finished plates, is a small, dark panel. Signor De Luca, the owner, calls it his beautiful system. It is a series of coded lights. A green light means table 4 needs water. A blue light means table 9 wants the check. And a small, blinking red light means there is a fault in the security camera feed. I had checked that panel when I clocked in. All lights were dark. Now, at 6:15 in the evening, the red light for camera 3 was blinking. A steady, rhythmic pulse. Camera 3. The camera that covers the main service corridor and the fire exit leading to the South Alley dock. It was not a fault. It was a blind spot. I walked back out to the dining room floor, my hands beginning to shake. I needed to see the floor plan. I went to the host stand. Carlo, the maitre d', was not there. I found him near the coat check, half hidden by a towering potted fig tree. He was not alone. He was with a man I did not recognize. The man wore a plain gray suit that fit him badly. His shoes were cheap, scuffed rubber soles. He was not a guest. The man in gray was holding a thick, plain manila envelope. He was holding it out to Carlo. Carlo's face was the color of spoiled milk. He looked sick. His hand, the one that usually held a wine bottle with perfect steadiness, was trembling. He took the envelope and quickly, without looking at it, slid it inside the breast pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He looked up then, his eyes scanning the room, and he saw me. He froze. We just stared at each other. Did not smile. He did not look away. He just stared, his eyes wide and terrified. It felt like an hour, but it was probably only 5 seconds. In restaurant time, that is an eternity. I knew that look. I had seen it on my father's face. It was not the look of a manager catching an employee watching him. It was the look of a man who had just sold his soul and was terrified someone had seen the receipt. I turned and walked away. The night went on. I smiled. I carried heavy trays. I poured wine. I was the invisible girl. At 8:50 in the evening, I was assigned to the private alcove, to Caleb Hart's table. I poured his water. I set down the breadbasket. I listened as he parried with the Rinaldi men, his voice calm and precise. He was smart, but he did not speak the language. He did not know what the polite smiles of the Rinaldi men really meant. I was standing by the service stand when I heard him laugh. It was a short, sharp sound, more like a bark of agreement than a sound of humor. "Gentlemen, if the terms are exactly as you have laid them out," he said, tapping the final page of the document, "I see no reason we cannot have this signature locked in by 9:45. The name of the time hit me like a physical blow. 9:45. Sylvia's voice, from hours earlier, echoed in my head. The switch flips at 9:45 exactly. This was not a plan. This was a piece of theater. And Caleb Hart's signature was the cue for the curtain to rise. I felt dizzy. I leaned against the wall. Caleb Hart picked up his phone, which had been buzzing, and set it down on the table, face up. He leaned in to look at a chart the man across from him was pointing to. A notification lit up the dark screen. It is a terrible habit, a professional hazard for a waitress. We see everything, we memorize everything. The stray lipstick on a collar, the name on a text message that does not match the name of the wife sitting opposite, the balance on a credit card receipt left behind. The notification was an alert from his own company, Heart Sentinel. It said, "Unusual login attempt Queens data center. Access denied." Queens. My heart stopped. Queens was Vico's territory. They were not just planning to grab him in an alley. They were already inside his company. They were in his systems. My own phone, a cheap burner I keep in my apron pocket, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I pulled it out, my fingers fumbling with the keys. I texted a number I had not dialed in years, Aunt Rosa. My message was 3 words, Vico in the house. The reply was almost instant. She is always awake. "Kid," she wrote back. "Kid, do not poke the beehive." I stared at the screen. Do not poke the beehive. It was my mother's voice. All over again. Do not stand in the middle of the road. It was the anthem of the Russo family. Run, hide, survive. Let the world burn, as long as you are not in the fire. I almost did. I swear I almost did. I could walk. I could go to the kitchen. Tell the chef I was sick. I could clock out. I could be back in my Hell's Kitchen studio before 10. I could be normal. Caleb Hart was a stranger, a rich man who built digital walls, unaware that the men in the room with him used old-fashioned knives. I needed air. I walked quickly to the ladies' restroom, my head pounding. I just needed to splash cold water on my face and think. I pushed the heavy door open. The lounge was empty, but one of the stall doors was locked. I heard the sharp click of a high-end lighter, and then the smell of a very expensive, very thin cigarette. I was turning on the faucet when I heard Sylvia's voice, low and angry, from inside the stall. She was on her phone again. "He is jittery," she snapped, "but it does not matter. The signal cuts for 90 seconds, 90. That is all Luca needs. Even if the chief executive officer pings his people, by the time they react, he will be halfway to the river." My blood did not just run cold, it stopped. Cut the signal 90 seconds. It was not just the camera, it was everything. His phone, his smartwatch, his entire connection to the outside world, a 90-second blackout. It was the technical knockout punch. They were not amateurs. This was Vico's signature. Clean, precise, and total. I looked up. I saw my reflection in the ornate gold leaf mirror. My face was white. My eyes were huge. I looked hunted. I looked exactly like my father. And that was when I decided I was done being invisible. I was done being a ghost. I was done running. My father, Marco Russo, was a brilliant accountant, but he was a coward. He saw the numbers. He knew what they added up to, and he did nothing but collect his commission until the day the numbers added up to him. He stood in the middle of the road, and the car did not stop. I am not my father. I turned off the water, my hands still dry. I walked out of the restroom. I pulled my apron strings tight. I was no longer Elena Marino. the apprentice. I was Elena Russo, the witness. I knew exactly what I was risking. My job, which I needed, my apartment, which I loved, my anonymity, which was the only inheritance my mother ever gave me. I was risking the thin, fragile shell of my normal life. If I did this, Vico would know, the family would know, the name Russo would be in a police report, and the ghosts would all come home. I did not care. I had lost more than a job before. I walked back toward the main dining room. I thought about Caleb Hart, the bodyguard of democracy, about to be dragged into the same medieval darkness that had swallowed my family whole. I thought about what to say. I could scream. I could pull the fire alarm. No, they would just grab him in the chaos. I needed to break the script. I would use the only weapons I had, my wits, my memory, and the fact that they did not see me. I thought of a line. "Sir, the main course tonight is freedom." I grimaced. That was terrible, too dramatic. Kindness, I realized as I reached the service stand, is not always a soft, gentle thing. Sometimes, in a world like this, kindness is a violent act. It is a shove. It is a breaking of the rules. It is an act of force against a cruel and calculating fate. I picked up a fresh highball glass. I picked up a heavy silver tray. They were the tools of my invisibility. I started walking toward the alcove. Caleb Hart did not stand up. He just stared at me. The name Vico was hanging in the air between us, a smoking, toxic thing. One of the Rinaldi men, the one with the overly white teeth, let out a short, sharp laugh. "Carlo," he said, his voice dangerously smooth, "please get this woman under control. She's disturbing our signing." Carlo took a step toward me, his hand outstretched, his face a mask of professional panic. "Miss Marino, you must come with me. You are fired." Caleb Hart held up a single finger. He did not look at Carlo. He did not look at the Rinaldi men. He just looked at me. "Wait." His voice was pure command. Carlo froze. "You have 10 seconds, Caleb said to me, his voice low. "Give me one fact. One. Not a name. A fact. Why should I believe you?" I did not have 10 seconds. I had maybe 2. I pulled the cheap burner phone from my apron pocket. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I had done something insane in the ladies' room, while Sylvia was in the stall. Talking about the 90-second blackout, she'd also been looking at her own phone. The big mirror over the sinks had shown me her reflection, and the reflection of her screen. I had pretended to fix my hair, and I had used my own phone's camera. The picture was blurry, but the words were clear. I slid the phone across the table, over the top of the napkin I had thrown on his documents. Caleb looked down. The screen showed my blurry photo of Sylvia's phone. It was an internal Rinaldi memo app. There was a single line of text next to a calendar item. It said, "Hart handover, 2145 South Dock." 9:45. Caleb's eyes flicked from the phone back to my face. The calculation was over. The man of logic had just received an illogical piece of data that confirmed his own internal warnings. He stood up. He did it so smoothly. It looked like a natural movement. He simply pushed his chair back. "Gentlemen," he said to the Rinaldi men, "I'm afraid I need a moment. This waitress has brought something to my attention." The Rinaldi men stood up, too. The smiles were gone. "Mr. Hart, this is not the time," the shiny one said. "This is precisely the time," Caleb said. He looked at me. "Lead the way." "You cannot be serious," the other Rinaldi man snarled. He was already reaching inside his jacket. "My security team is monitoring this dinner." Caleb lied, his voice like ice. "My location pings them every 30 seconds. If I am delayed or if I go off route, they will be here. I am simply going to speak with this young woman." It was a brilliant bluff. He walked around the table and stood next to me. "Where?" he asked. "Not the main hall," I whispered. "The kitchen. Now." I turned and pushed through the service door, him right behind me. We burst into the chaos of the kitchen. The air was hot, filled with steam, the smell of garlic, and the sound of shouting chefs. We were halfway to the back service corridor when a black tuxedo blocked our path. "Elena Carlo," the maitre d' hissed. He stood in front of us, his arms spread wide, his face slick with sweat. "You cannot? The guests are not allowed in the kitchen." "Carlo, get out of my way," I said, trying to push past him. "No, I cannot. You do not understand what you are doing." His eyes were wide with terror. He was not protecting restaurant policy. He was protecting his own skin. He was the man who had taken the envelope. Caleb spoke. "Sir, I am the guest. I insist on using this exit." "It is not an exit," Carlo pleaded, his eyes darting toward the gas fireplace controls, a complex panel of switches near the kitchen door. I saw the look. His eyes lingered there for just a second too long. In my father's world, that meant one thing. The fireplace was not just for heat, it was a switch, a trigger, maybe for the gas, maybe for the blackout. I did not have time to figure it out. I grabbed Carlo by the lapels of his expensive tuxedo. It was the most unprofessional thing I had ever done. "Signor De Luca's," I said, my face inches from his. I used the owner's name like a weapon. "Do you want me to tell Signor De Luca who you took the envelope from? Do you want me to tell him about the gray suit?" Carlo's face crumpled. The fear in his eyes was replaced by pure, abject defeat. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing. He stepped aside. We ran past him, down the short hall toward the steel door that led to the service stairs. The clock on the kitchen wall, a big, greasy digital display, read 9:43 in the evening. "Where are we going?" Caleb demanded. "Right behind me." "The south alley is a trap," I said, my hand on the push bar of the door. "We are going north." "Luca is in the north hall," a voice said. I looked over my shoulder. It was Carlo, and he was still standing by the fireplace, a broken man. "He is waiting on the service stairs. Luca, I saw him." He had made a choice, a late one, but a choice. I changed direction. "The wine cellar," I snapped. "It is this way, below ground." Just as I said it, the lights in the kitchen flickered. Once. Twice. Then they buzzed and came back on, but dimmer. I heard it then, a sound that did not belong in the kitchen, the sound of heavy, expensive, leather-soled shoes on the tile floor of the service corridor, not the scuff of a busboy, the measured, confident tread of a hunter. "Luca?" Caleb had heard him too. He grabbed my arm and pulled me into a small alcove where the clean dishes were stacked. "This is insane." He breathed. He was looking at me, his eyes sharp. "What is in this for you?" "I will tell you later," I said, "if we have a later." He stared at me for one more second. He reached into his pocket, not his pants pocket, the inside pocket of his suit jacket. He pulled out something small, black and metallic. It was a pocket taser. "Take this," he said, pressing it into my palm. It was heavy and cold. I looked at it, then back at him. My eyebrows raised. "Tonight's tip is pretty shocking," I whispered. A tiny, almost invisible smile quirked the corner of his mouth. It was gone in an instant. "The north stairs are blocked," I said. "The main dining room is where they expect you to go. We have to go down." "Mr. Hart." The voice was sweet as caramel, as cloying as burnt sugar. "Sylvia." She was standing at the head of the kitchen service stairs, the ones that led down to the cellar and the employee lockers. She was blocking our only way out. She had a perfect, concerned smile on her face. "Mr. Hart, there you are," she cooed. "Mr. Rinaldi has arrived. The car is waiting out front. He is so excited to celebrate with you." Caleb was a rock. He did not move. He just looked at her. "Mr. Rinaldi is already here. I thought he was waiting for my signature." "He wanted to surprise you," she said. I stepped forward, putting myself between them. I needed to stall. The clock on the wall was mocking me. 9:44 in the evening. I smiled, a big, stupid, empty-headed smile. "Oh, wow. What kind of car?" I gushed. "Is it a fancy one? I bet it is. I have never been in a really fancy car. How long have you been in New York? I bet you go to all the best parties. Sylvia's smile twitched. I was the annoying, starstruck waitress. I was an idiot. I was wasting her time. That is not really... Is it a Bentley I pushed? My Aunt Rosa. She says the Bentleys are the only ones that matter. Caleb was not watching me, and he was watching Sylvia, but his left hand was at his side, his thumb tapping a frantic, complex rhythm on the side of his smartwatch. I did not know what he was doing. I just saw the side of his wrist, the skin moving with the rapid tapping. He was sending a message. He was triggering his SOS. Luca's footsteps stopped. He was right outside the kitchen, in the main corridor. Sylvia's eyes flicked to the clock. Her smile dropped. "Mr. Hart," she said, her voice hard. "Now." The digital clock on the wall flipped. 9:45 in the evening. And the world ended. The lights did not just go out. They were murdered. The kitchen, the hallway, the world plunged into a darkness so total, so absolute. It was like a thick, black velvet blanket had been thrown over my head. The buzz of the refrigerators died. The fans stopped. Even the music from the dining room was gone. A 90-second blackout. The darkness was not silent. I heard Sylvia gasp. I heard the scuff of Luca's shoe from the corridor. And I felt Caleb's hand grab my arm. "Now," I whispered. I did not wait. I yanked him forward, past the frozen Sylvia, and threw my shoulder into the heavy oak door of the wine cellar. It was never locked during service. We stumbled down the 3 steps, falling into the cool, damp blackness. I pulled the heavy door shut behind us. The lock snicked into place. We were in the dark. It smelled of earth and cork and sour, spilled wine. I could hear Caleb breathing next to me, a fast, controlled pant. "What in the hell is this?" he whispered. His voice was not panicked. It was furious. "It is a Pasqua," I whispered back, my heart hammering against my ribs. "It is an Easter play." I told him everything. I told him in short, sharp, terrified whispers. "Vico, Vincenzo Rinaldi. He's my distant cousin, and this is what they do. They create a problem. They offer a solution. They walk you out the side door. The south alley was the trap. The car is not a car. It is a van. They were not going to sign your deal. They were going to restructure you. Break your wing." I heard a long, slow exhale in the dark. "So you are risking your life," he said, his voice flat. "You are doing all of this because of a bad night with your relatives." I leaned my head back against a rack of wine bottles. They were cold against my hot skin. I thought of my father. I thought of his empty chair at the dinner table. "No," I said. "I'm doing this because my father had no one to pull him out of the road." The silence in the cellar was as thick as the darkness. Then, from upstairs, we heard the sudden, mechanical whump of the generators kicking in. The lights in the wine cellar, a single, bare bulb, flickered on. We stared at each other. He was breathing hard. His suit was impeccable. My apron was stained with something. "They will be coming for this door," he said. He was already moving, scanning the room. "No," I said. "They will not. They lost you in the dark. They will assume you ran for the front door or the north exit." "How do you know?" "Because they are arrogant," I said, "and they think I'm just a stupid waitress." I moved to the door and listened. I heard shouting far away. The chaos was upstairs, in the main dining room. "We cannot go up that way," I said, "but we are not trapped." I pointed to the back of the cellar. There is a dumbwaiter for the heavy cases. It goes up, but it comes out behind the main bar. Caleb nodded. "Good. But we are not going to use it," I said, a new, insane idea forming. I pointed to a stack of large, silver serving trays leaning against the wall. Next to them were the metal covers for the main courses. "We are going to walk out the front door," I said. He looked at me like I was crazy. I grinned. It was a shaky, terrified grin. "The main course is being served. The whole floor is in motion. We are going to de-escalate. We are going to blend in." I picked up a heavy silver tray. Question is, Mr. Hart, I said, handing it to him, do you know how to carry one of these? He took the tray from my hand. He balanced it perfectly on his open palm. His arm bent at a perfect 90-degree angle. He lifted it as if he had been doing it all his life. I will manage, he said. Lead on. We did not use the stairs. We used the dumbwaiter. It was a tight fit. Caleb Hart, Chief Executive Officer of Hart Sentinel, crammed himself into the wooden box first, his expensive suit jacket bunched up around his shoulders. I squeezed in after him, my apron catching on the door. It was dark, smelled of grease and old wood, and I was pressed hard against a man who, 20 minutes ago, was a complete stranger. I pulled the rope, and the box began to rise with a low, groaning complaint. We emerged, floor by floor, into the back of the main bar. I pushed the small door open and tumbled out onto a stack of linen napkins. Caleb followed, emerging with a grimace. The main dining room was in chaos. The 90-second blackout had ended, but the panic had just begun. The lights were back on, dim and flickering under the emergency generator, but people were shouting. Guests were standing, demanding their checks. The Rinaldi men from the alcove were gone. Where now? Caleb asked, his voice low. He was still holding the silver tray, a perfect mirror of mine. We looked, for all the world, like two servers caught in the middle of a crisis. They had two traps, I whispered, straightening my apron. The South Alley was the first one. The 90-second blackout was the second. They will be searching the front exit and the north stairs, assuming you ran. So we go for a fire exit, he said. No, I said. We go where they just were. The South Alley, the Pasqua failed. They have moved on. It is the only door they are not watching. It was a gamble, but it was the only one I had. We moved. We did not run. We walked. We looked like staff. We carried our empty silver trays and moved through the panicked guests with purpose. We threaded our way back toward the kitchen. Carlo was gone. The kitchen was empty, the chefs and line cooks having run out to the dining room to see what was happening. We passed the silent fireplace, its gas flame now extinguished. We reached the steel door to the South Alley. The red fire exit sign above it was the only bright light in the corridor. I put my hand on the push bar. The digital clock on the wall, now running on backup power, read 9:58 in the evening. I pushed the door open. The alley was cold. It smelled of wet garbage and the river. A single weak bulb cast a yellow, sickly light, and the trap was still set. A large, black, windowless van was parked at the dock. Its engine was idling, a low, predatory rumble. Two men, shadows in dark clothes, stood by the open side door. And standing near them, under the weak light, was Carlo. He was not a hostage. He was not a victim. He was with them. His face was pale, and he was wringing his hands, his betrayal now complete. My heart sank. My plan was wrong. They had not moved on. Luca was there, Vico's man. He was standing near the van, shouting into his phone. He is not at the front. Sylvia cannot find him. Lock the street. He did not get out. He turned, and he saw us. His eyes widened, first in surprise, then in a cold, reptilian recognition. He snapped his phone shut and started walking toward us. Well, well, he said. The boss was wondering where you went, Mr. Hart, and you brought the help. Caleb stepped slightly in front of me. It is over, Caleb said, his voice hard. My team has been alerted. Luca just smiled. Your team is dark. You are dark. We are the only ones here. This was it. I fumbled in my apron pocket. The taser was there, cold and hard, but something else was there, too. A small, white plastic disc, an AirTag. I had found it last week, wedged between two floor mats in the kitchen. I had meant to turn it in to Lost and Found. I had forgotten. It was just a piece of kitchen junk. I palmed it. Luca was focused on Caleb. He was the prize. I was just the waitress. I stepped forward, my tray still in my hand. Excuse me, I said, my voice high and trembling. I hated how I sounded. I think I am lost. I was just taking this out. Luca barely glanced at me. "Get out of the way, girl." I tripped. It was the oldest, stupidest move in the book. I stumbled forward, my body lurching right into him. "Clumsy," I yelped as I collided with his expensive overcoat. My hand, the one holding the AirTag, jammed into his deep coat pocket. I let go of the disc. My fingers brushed against something hard and cold inside. Metal. Luca grabbed my arm, his fingers biting into my skin like steel clamps. He shoved me, hard. I said, "Move." "That is quite enough of that, Luca." The voice was not Luca's. It was smooth. It was calm. It was the voice from my nightmares. Vincenzo Vico Rinaldi stepped out from the shadow of the van. He was beautiful, in the way a panther is beautiful. He wore a suit the color of a midnight sky. His smile was warm, and it did not touch his eyes. He looked at Caleb. Then his gaze slid to me, and it stayed there. He let out a small, appreciative sigh. "Lena," he said, using the name my father used to call me, my childhood name. "Piccola Lena, look at you. All grown up. Family does not abandon family, do they?" He was closing the distance. Luca was on one side. The two shadows by the van were on the other. Carlo was frozen by the wall. A ghost already. I had to keep him talking. I had to keep him focused on me. "Family is the place you call," I said, my voice shaking less now. "Even when the house is burning down." Vico smiled. "See, she remembers." He looked at Caleb. "A smart girl. She understands loyalty. It is a shame you do not— Mr. Hart, we were going to make so much money together." Caleb said nothing, and he was watching Vico, but I saw his gaze flick to Luca, then to the men by the van. He was calculating the threat. "So," Vico said, taking a step closer to me, "what is this? Are you protecting him, Lena, your new friend?" And then the world exploded. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Nobody move hands in the air." The shout was a woman's voice, sharp and amplified by a bullhorn. Blinding white lights flooded the alley, turning the night into a sterile, terrifying day. Red and blue strobes painted the brick walls. Men and women in dark tactical gear poured in from both ends of the alley. Vico did not hesitate. He moved like a snake. He grabbed Sylvia, who had just run out the door, and yanked her in front of him. His arm clamped around her throat, a human shield. Carlo, seeing his world end, made a desperate lunge. He went for the power box on the wall, the master switch for the alley lights. He was going to plunge us back into darkness. "No," I shouted. I did not think. I ran at him. He raised his hand toward the switch. I pulled the taser from my pocket and jammed it against his wrist. I pressed the button. There was a wet, electric crack. Carlo screamed, a high, thin sound. His whole body convulsed, and he dropped to the pavement like a sack of cement. I stared at him, my hand shaking. The smell of ozone and burnt hair filled my nose. I had never, ever taken a person down in my life, not even in my dreams. A shadow moved. Luca. He was not going for Caleb. He was coming for me. He lunged, his hand coming out of his pocket. He was not holding the AirTag. He was holding a knife. He grabbed my shirt and threw me. My head hit the brick wall with a sickening thud. The world went white and blurry. I saw Caleb move. He did not throw a punch. He moved inside Luca's attack, a fluid, brutal motion. He blocked the knife hand, spun, and used his body weight to trap Luca's arm. It was not a bar fight. It was a practiced, disciplined system. Krav Maga. Caleb twisted. Luca's wrist snapped. The knife clattered on the wet ground. Caleb forced him face down onto the pavement, his knee planted firmly in Luca's back. It was over in 3 seconds. I slid down the wall, my head spinning. Vico was screaming. Still holding Sylvia. You did this!" he shrieked at me, his face a mask of rage. "This is Russo blood. She is a rat, just like her father." A woman in a sharp black suit, her gun held steady in both hands, walked calmly toward him. "Let her go, Vincenzo. It is over." "All blood is red, Vico," I managed to rasp, my throat dry. Vico stared at me, his eyes promising 1,000 years of pain. He shoved Sylvia to the ground and raised his hands. The woman in the suit cuffed him, Her name tag read CHO. She was in charge. Special Agent Maya Cho? She looked at Vico, then at Luca, then at Carlo twitching on the ground, then she looked at me. Her gaze was intense. You, she said, walking over to me. You know a lot more than you are saying. The alley was full of sirens. The sound was deafening, drowning everything. I started to shake. It was not from the cold. It was not from the blow to my head. It was the sudden, awful realization that my invisibility was gone. My past, the one I had buried so deep, was now lying exposed on the wet pavement for the whole world to see. Caleb was breathing heavily. He looked at Luca, then at the Federal Bureau of Investigation agents. He walked over to me. He did not offer a hand. He just stood there, blocking the view. "You saved me," he said, his voice quiet in the middle of the noise. I looked up at him, the world still spinning. "Now," he said, "it is my turn." The newspapers called it a failed kidnapping. They called it an attempted corporate abduction. They called it a brilliant sting by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, acting on a tip. The headlines screamed about the Heart Sentinel CEO and the Mafia-linked private equity fund. And then, on the third day, a reporter dug up my name. Waitress with mob ties thwarts kidnapping. The name Russo was there, right below the fold, a black stain on the gray paper. They printed my father's name, Marco Russo. They spelled out his alleged connections. They ran a picture of me, a grainy shot from my high school yearbook, my face round and hopeful. The invisibility I had spent 15 years building was gone. It had been burned away in 90 seconds of darkness and the flash of a taser. I looked at my name in print, and I waited for the old, familiar shame to rise up. It did not come. I just felt tired. And then, for the first time in my life, I felt something else. Not pride, acceptance. My normal had changed. This was my life now. Il Sistante closed for 2 days. The official story was a gas leak. On the third day, Signor De Luca called me. He asked me to come to the restaurant at noon. When I arrived, the dining room was dark. The chairs were all stacked on top of the tables, their legs pointing at the ceiling like a forest of dead trees. The air was cold and smelled of stale wine and bleach. Signor De Luca was waiting for me in the kitchen. He was standing by the silent, scrubbed-clean steel pass. He looked older than I had ever seen him. His shoulders slumped inside his expensive shirt. He did not yell. He did not ask questions. He just handed me a white envelope. Inside, there was my severance pay. It was generous. Far more than I was owed. Tucked behind the cash was a single, folded piece of the restaurant's heavy cream stationery. There was only one sentence, written in his elegant, looping script. "You owe New York a peaceful dinner." I looked up at him. His eyes were sad. "You are a good girl, Elena," he said, his voice quiet. "But you are not a waitress, and this is a place for quiet people. Go be whatever it is you are, just not here." I nodded. I could not speak. I took the envelope and walked out of the kitchen, my footsteps echoing in the empty, dark dining room. My next meeting was less gentle. Special Agent Maya Cho's office was in a tall, gray building downtown that did not have a name on the front. It was a small, beige room with fluorescent lights that hummed. She did not offer me coffee. She just pointed to a hard plastic chair. "You lied," she said. She was not angry. It was a statement of fact. "You told the responding agents you were just a waitress who overheard a comment, but you knew the name Vico. You knew the name Pasqua. You have a connection." "Russo," I said. "My father was Marco Russo." She nodded, her face giving nothing away. "We know? We've been looking at Rinaldi Capital for 8 months. Their cryptocurrency mixers are a nightmare. Your cousin Vico is clean on paper, but his digital shadow is filthy. We were building a case. You just accelerated the timeline. So I'm under arrest." "You are a witness," she corrected me. "A very valuable, very complicated witness. We need your testimony to connect Vincenzo Rinaldi directly to the attempted kidnapping. Not just the financial crimes. We need you to put the Pasqua in context. We need you to testify about Luca, about Sylvia, about Carlo. And what do I get? She leaned forward. What do you want, protection? We can offer relocation, a new name. We are very good at that. I thought of my mother, Carmela, in her small apartment in Queens. I thought of her fear when I had called her. I do not want a new name, I said. I'm tired of new names. I want an eraser. She raised an eyebrow. My mother, I said, when my father disappeared, and she did things to survive. She wrote bad checks. She had an undeclared income from sewing, small things, stupid things, but they are on her record. They are a shadow she has lived under for 15 years. You want my testimony? You erase her past. You make her clean. Maya Cho stared at me for a long time. That is a complex ask. Then you have a complex witness. I said, I stood up. I had one more condition. And one more thing. My Aunt Rosa, she has a food truck. She has permits, but sometimes she parks in the wrong zone. She gets hassled. I want the hassles to stop. I want her and her truck to be protected. Not by you, just left alone. By everyone, including my cousin's friends, who are going to be very, very angry. You are asking for federal protection for a coffee truck. I am demanding it, I said. Maya Cho almost smiled. She stood and held out her hand. We have a deal, Miss Russo. It was the first time I had heard the name spoken without shame. I did not hear from Caleb Hart for a week. I saw his name in the news. He had officially, and very publicly, canceled the $120 million deal with Rinaldi Capital. But he had not just walked away. Instead, the news reported, Hart Sentinel was forming a strategic security alliance. He was splitting the $120 million and investing it into two small, rival security startups. Both, the article noted, were founded by immigrants. One was run by a woman out of Austin, the other by a team of coders in Queens. It was a quiet, surgical, and very public statement. It was a middle finger to Vico's entire philosophy of buying, stripping, and destroying. Caleb was not just a bodyguard for democracy, he was a builder. He finally called me, and he did not text. He called. I owe you a thank you, he said. His voice was the same as it had been in the alcove. Calm, direct. You do not owe me anything, Mus, I said. I'm just glad you are safe. I would like to thank you in person, he said. Are you free? That depends, I said, trying for my old wit. Are you inviting me to another fine dining establishment because I am currently between jobs? He was silent for a beat. No, nothing like that. Meet me at the cheese shop, the one under the 59th Street Bridge. 1 hour? It was the most unromantic, most un-CEO-like place he could have possibly chosen. It was a loud, bright, smelly shop tucked under the roaring traffic of the bridge. It was safe. It was public. It was perfect. He was waiting inside, standing by the Gorgonzola display. He was not wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater. He looked human. Thank you for coming, he said. I am not going to date you. You know. I said, the words just fell out. I do not date chief executive officers. I do not date men with security details, which I assume you have somewhere nearby. Caleb nodded, his expression serious. Good, because I do not date waitresses. I blinked. Oh. But I would like, he said, to get to know the person who saved my life. He held out his hand. My name is Caleb. We bought 2 sandwiches with cheese I could not pronounce and 2 bottles of water, and we went outside. We sat on a cold stone bench by the river, the traffic roaring over our heads, and we talked. I told him everything. I told him about my father, Marco Russo. I told him about the ledgers my mother burned, the whispers about Pasqua, the doll with the cracked neck from Vico. I told him about my oath to be normal, and how that oath had shattered in his private dining room. He listened. He just listened, his gray eyes on the water. When I was done, he unwrapped his own sandwich. Detroit, he said. What? I grew up in Detroit, he said. My mother was a nurse. Night shift, emergency room. She worked 16-hour days for most of my childhood. She saved people for a living. But she came home with blood on her shoes and not enough money for the gas bill. He looked at me. She was the kindest person I ever knew, and the toughest. She taught me that you do not wait for the system to save you. You do not wait for permission to do the right thing. You just do it. You run toward the fire. We sat there, 2 survivors, 2 children raised by strong, tired, kind women. He was a chief executive officer. I was an unemployed waitress with mob ties, but on that bench under the noisy bridge, we were just 2 people. The next day, I made coffee in my apartment. I put it in a good thermos. I took the subway to a neighborhood I had never been to. Carlo was under house arrest. His lawyer had cut a deal. His testimony, plus mine, was enough to bury Luca. He opened the door himself, his ankle monitor a thick black band above his sock. He looked smaller. His hair was not perfect. He saw me, and the thermos in my hand, and his eyes filled with tears. "You," he whispered. I did not say anything. I just poured him a cup of the espresso. He took it, his hand shaking. "Why?" he asked, his voice thick. "After what I did, I took the money. I was going to let them take him. I almost let them get you." I looked at him, this broken man in his sad apartment. "Because no one is born to be a shadow. Carlo," I said, "you just got lost in one." I left the thermos on his table and I walked out. I had one last piece of the night in my pocket, the air tag. I had charged my phone and found the notification. The tag belonged to a guest who had dined at Il Sestante a week before the incident, an older woman. I had her name from the reservation. I found her address on the Upper West Side. I went to her building, and the doorman let me up. She was a tiny, elegant woman with bright blue eyes. "I am so sorry," I said, holding out the small white disc. "I found this at the restaurant. I meant to turn it in, but things got complicated." She looked at the AirTag, then at me. She smiled, a warm, genuine smile. "You are the girl from the news, are you not?" she asked. I nodded. She pushed the AirTag back into my palm and closed my fingers around it. "You keep it, dear," she said. "Keep it to remember that even when you feel lost, someone is always watching." I walked home through the park, the small disc heavy in my pocket. I thought she was being poetic. I thought she was talking about God or fate. I thought about my mother, and I smiled. 6 months later, the doors to Il Sestante opened again, but the name above the door was new. It was painted in simple, warm gold letters, Il Sestante Community Kitchen. Caleb had bought it. He had quietly, without any press, purchased the restaurant from a very relieved Signor De Luca, the main dining room, with its dark wood and leather banquettes, was still there, serving beautiful food. But the kitchen had doubled in size. The back half of the restaurant, where the private alcoves used to be, was now a state-of-the-art training facility for people re-entering the workforce. Signor De Luca, having agreed to stay on as a patron, spent his days happily grumbling that the espresso machines were too complicated and the new cooks did not understand the true meaning of al dente. He had never been happier. I did not work the floor anymore. I was the coordinator of the second service program. It was my job to find people who had been spat out by the system, people with minor court offenses or bad luck, and give them a place in the kitchen. My mother, Carmela, came in 3 times a week. She sat in the bright new dining room and taught our trainees how to weave bread baskets. Her fingers, once stiff with fear, now nimble and quick. Aunt Rosa, who had finally parked her truck, was our new, terrifyingly strict latte art instructor. She taught everyone how to pour a perfect, if slightly lopsided heart. Caleb and I did not post pictures of ourselves on Instagram. Our romance was not for public consumption. We did not promise each other forever in breathless whispers. We promised to show up early on Monday mornings to review the gas bills. We held hands while arguing over the price of organic flour. Our love, we had discovered was about discipline. It was about showing up. I kept in touch with Special Agent Maya Cho. She sent me an email a month after the trial. Vincenzo Vico Rinaldi had been sentenced. His sentence was long. Sylvia, Vico's assistant, had cooperated fully. She had traded every piece of data she had for a reduced sentence. She was in witness protection, probably learning a new skill herself. And Carlo, our maitre d', his testimony against Luca had been vital. He had served his time, and Maya told me he was now working as a parking attendant at a garage in Queens. He had a new life. One door closing, another one opening. On the wall by the new kitchen door, I hung a large black slate, the kind we used to use for the daily specials. On it, I had written a single sentence in white chalk. Healing begins when kindness meets courage. I knew I had borrowed the line. I had stolen it from the memory of a dark wine cellar and the voice of a man in a gray sweater talking about his mother. On our opening night, the restaurant was full. It was loud and warm and full of laughter. At the end of the night, we checked the online reservation system. There was already a review, posted an hour ago from an anonymous account. It was only one sentence. The waitress saved my son. Caleb and I read it together, our shoulders touching. We both assumed it was from his mother, the nurse from Detroit. The next day was Saturday. I was in my apartment in Hell's Kitchen, the same tiny studio. I was making coffee, and the old loud blender I used for my smoothies was rattling the whole counter. There was a sharp knock on my door. I opened it. It was my landlady, Eleanor Hart. She was a stern, older woman who lived on the floor below me. She was tiny, elegant, and always seemed to be annoyed by my existence. She had, on more than one occasion, complained about the noise from my blender. "Eleanor," I said, my heart sinking, "I'm so sorry about the noise. I was just—" "Oh, hush, dear," she said. She was not frowning. She was smiling. "I'm not here to complain." She looked past me, into my tiny, cluttered apartment. "I just came by to see if you were settling in," she said. Settling in, I was confused. I have lived here for 2 years. "Yes," she said, her blue eyes sparkling. "But you are settled now. I wanted to see it." She looked back at me. "I'm so very proud of you, Elena." I did not know what to say. Caleb chose that moment to walk up behind me. He had his own key. He was wearing sweatpants and his hair was a mess. "Mom," he said, stopping dead in the hallway, "what are you doing here?" I stared at him. Then I stared at her, at Eleanor, my landlady, Eleanor Hart. My face went hot. It was a blush so deep I thought I might actually faint. "I was just welcoming my new tenant." "Properly," Eleanor said, her smile widening. "She's a little loud in the mornings, but her heart is in the right place." Caleb started to laugh. It was a deep, genuine, rumbling laugh. "Yeah," he said, pointing at his mother. "It was you." "I have no idea what you're talking about," she said, but her eyes were dancing. "I merely mentioned to my old friend, Signor De Luca, that a very capable, very kind young woman lived in my building. I had seen her help old Mr. Patel on the stairs one day when he dropped his groceries. I simply told De Luca that he should hire her. Good help is so hard to find." She had introduced me months ago. She had seen me. The woman I thought was just a cranky old landlady had been my anonymous guardian. She was the one who had put me in Il Sestante. She was the someone who was always watching. Caleb wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me into his side as he kissed his mother's cheek. "My mother," he said, looking at me, his eyes full of a love so deep it made me feel dizzy. "She always picks well." A week later, I was boxing up an order of cannoli from our new bakery program. I slid a small, handwritten note inside the box. I took the subway to Queens. I found the parking garage Maya Cho had told me about. I found Carlo. He was wearing a bright yellow vest and looked thin, but his eyes were clear. He saw me and he froze, his hand on the gate lever. I held out the box. He did not take it. I cannot accept," he whispered. "It is just a pastry. Carlo," I said, I set the box down on the counter of his small booth. He would see the note when he opened it. The note said, "When you are ready, the kitchen has a dishwashing spot open. We are very busy." I turned and walked away. The next Monday, I was in my new office, which was really just a glorified closet, arguing with a vendor about the price of tomatoes. There was a knock on the door. I looked up. It was Carlo. He was standing in the doorway, his head down. He was holding the crumpled note in his hand. I smiled. "You are late," I said. I pointed to a hook on the wall. "Your apron is over there, the one I used to wear. Welcome to second service." He did not look up, but I saw him nod. He walked to the hook, took down the plain black apron, and began, with shaking hands, to tie it around his waist. He was starting over, and so, in a way, was I. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious. Where are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments where you are listening from so we can all connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support the channel, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.